Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Okay, so this episode is kind of interesting in that it kind of is an episode where once again we have a monster that's working with the gang, and I do find that kind of interesting. But there's also it is also very interesting that there's actually a very funny gag. But this episode also kind of continues the central narrative and kind of confirms some things for us about what's going on with Mystery Incorporated, and kind of unveils a key member of Mystery Incorporated at this point. But or at least the original Mystery Incorporated. But in any case, this episode opens up with a fisherman and his first mate are sardining out in the water. I'm gonna show the sardiner, but it will eventually become very funny. But in any case, the sardiner is complaining about the fact that they haven't caught any fish in a while, and of course he eventually he laments on the fact that the only place where they can actually go to get more fish is Dead Man's Point, and the first mate openly objects to this, pointing out that for Dead Man's Point is supposedly haunted and a very famous stay away place for any sort of fisherman. And of course, the skipper then points out that he does know it's very dangerous, but also points out that they're fishermen and that they do stupid things all the time, so he's not particularly worried about it. At which point they sail into a deep fog at Dead Man's Point, and with the skipper then making a very humorous joke about the fact that making a very humorous joke about the fact that that the fog is thicker than sea poop, and of course it's a play on pea soup, but it's just a little gag that apparently the skipper just kind of comes up with, and sure enough, as he was hoping, they do wind up finding a lot of fish at Dead Man's Point, and of course the skipper is very happy about the fact that he's caught so much fish, but it's at this point where they're actually swarmed by a group of monsters. As we find out, there's a reason people don't go to Dead Man's Point, and that's because apparently there's these creatures called fish freaks that just kind of show up out of nowhere. Case in point, they then proceed to swarm the skipper's boat, and after cutting his net so that all of his fish fall out, they then proceed to swarm the boat and attack them, and the two men realize too late that the rumors about Dead Man's Point are actually true, and the last we see of them is screaming. At which point we see Mystery Incorporated actually going around town, going about their business at the time of the mystery, and Fred and Daphne go on another date, but they actually wind up going is on a date to the Crystal Cove Mystery Museum, and here they actually start reminiscing about a couple of the villains that they've caught, and most of them are actually villains that we've seen before in previous incarnations of Scooby-Doo. I've already talked about that, but there are two new statues that we actually see while they're in there. One is about a scam artist named Flam Flam, who apparently was a kid, who is apparently a professional scam artist, and Fred remarks that he unfortunately had to sit that mystery out because he went to trapping camp, but they do reminisce about the fact that apparently whatever he did, they don't elaborate on what he did, but apparently what he did was enough to get him sent away for life, which Daphne remarks that for a kid is actually pretty cruel. And then there's another, and I've been waiting to talk about this, but then there's a very humorous scene where Daphne spies a statue of Scooby-Doo, and remarks that she hasn't seen him in a long time, and it's at this point where Fred pulls away and remarks that they said that they all agreed to never talk him out again ever. So yeah, I think I should talk about this, and I'm just gonna go on a little bit of a tangent here to talk about this. So if you guys don't know, or rather, I'm sure anybody who's watched enough Scooby-Doo at this point, and especially some of the more modern stuff knows at this point, is Scooby-Doo is the sixth member of Mystery Incorporated, and he was kind of written out of the show after a certain point. So Scooby-Doo was introduced as the sixth member of Mystery Incorporated, and the way he worked, and basically what he was is that unlike the other characters who would actively either solve the mystery which was the case of Fred, Daphne, and Velma, or Run Away in the case of Shaggy and Scooby. Not only would Scrappy not really contribute to actually solving the mysteries, but he would actually try and fight the monster instead, which was a very interesting dynamic regarding Scrappy-Doo, and I do kind of like that as his character. But and of course he was a very popular mascot at the time. He was introduced at a time when Scooby-Doo wasn't doing very well financially, and they needed somebody to introduce in the story to kind of spice things up a little bit, and Scrappy wound up being the perfect fit for that. He wound up saving the show from going under, and now the rest is history, and Scooby-Doo is still alive and well today. But the reason I'm talking about him is that over time, Scrappy slowly became the studios that created Scooby-Doo eventually became too reliant on Scrappy, and as a result of that, Scrappy-Doo started to increasingly take over the show to the point where he was filling the roles of Fred, Daphne, and Velma as well as his own. And in addition to going up to fight the monsters, he was now the person solving the mystery, fighting traps, and being the damsel in distress, and all those other things that you would expect from those characters. But yeah, he eventually just kind of took over the show to the point where the studio decided to kind of retcon him out and make it so that they can only now bring him up if they mention how bad he had gotten. And yeah, and of course in interviews for the show they mentioned that they only include the joke because by their own admission nobody really on the show really hated Scrappy, and it seems to suggest that there's some sort of mandate in place at Warner Brothers where they're now no longer allowed to talk about Scrappy unless they mention how bad he is. And I should mention I like Scrappy. Scrappy did nothing wrong. It's not his fault. It was the writers leaning on him as a crush that was the problem. It was the fact that they got so reliant on Scrappy that he eventually just took over the show. So, if anybody brings, and I doubt Warner Brothers is going to see this, but if anybody at Warner Brothers wants to bring him back, I think the best thing to do would be to just keep him the way he was in his original debut series. Just have them contribute to the mysteries, but have them be there as like the sixth member, and don't have them like take over for anybody else. That is where the problem came from when they actually talked about Scrappy. But yeah, that's why. So in any case, yeah, Scrappy-Doo, sixth member of Mystery Incorporated. He was kind of retconned out at a point, and it's unclear what he actually did in this incarnation of Mystery Incorporated. I would assume it's something similar to what the live action movies kind of suggested, where he was the sixth member of Mystery Incorporated, but they also mentioned that he eventually got too big for his britches, and in the live action movie, in the first live action movie, I should mention, they give a whole backstory to him about how the reason he was kicked out of Mystery Incorporated was because he tried to assert his dominance over the rest of the group, tried to make himself its official leader, and also to add insult to injury, he pissed on Daphne, so they kicked him out. So yeah, that's basically the origin story for why Scrappy-Doo is no longer in the gang. And considering that the Luna Ghost, also from the first movie, is in the museum as well, I would assume it's a similar backstory. I would assume he eventually got too big for his britches, and Mystery Inc. kicked him out over it. And we haven't seen him since. And I would assume he pulled the same plot that he did in the movie, where he tried to kind of he tried to do like some sort of supernatural thing and got caught. So yeah, I would imagine he did eventually I would imagine that's what happened to Scrappy. I have no idea because I am not the writer for the show, but I don't know. It is interesting to think about. Scrappy obviously did something to be in their Hall of Infamy, so that's a bit of a speculation. What did Scrappy do? Let me know in the comments what he did. or rather, what you think he did. I have no idea what he did, but obviously it's something bad if he's in the museum where all the bad guys are. So yeah, I don't know what Scrappy did. If you have a theory, let me know in the comments. But in any case, with that little long tangent out of the way, we also then cut to Shaggy and Scooby, who are currently in the Bloody Steak, and it's all you can gorge night, and the manager isn't happy about them being there, and he tells the waitress to tell them that that's their last plate of food, and that they have to leave after that. And of course, Shaggy and Scooby object, pointing out that's all you can gorge night, and that they're obligated to keep feeding them. But of course, the waitress then proceeds to point out that obviously they said the all you can eat gorge night was intended for amateurs, and the two of them are obviously professionals at inhaling their food, and And of course, Scooby and Shaggy take that as a compliment, and Shaggy even offers to show the waitress how they actually do it and explain the process. And of course, the waitress is actually kind of interested because it does seem like an interesting thing. And so far, I think this is the only source of information as regarding how Scooby and Shaggy actually eat so much food. But as Shaggy explains, they've actually gotten really good at holding their breath, and basically they can hold their breath for a very long time so that they can eat as much food as they want without having to breathe first. So yeah, and of course Scooby then proceeds to demonstrate that by inhaling all of the remaining food on the table, and the waitress then proceeds to remark that they have way too much free time and leaves. And finally we have Velma, who is alone in her room with all the Dario University archives and all that Mr. E gave them. It's stated that he stole them, so I mean, obviously Velma just has some sort of strange thing in her room that she probably shouldn't have. But in any case, Velma is then proceeding to leave a very angry message on their website that they apparently set up at some point, and of course she's updating her entry about how she's alone by herself and has no new mysteries to report, but gets increasingly angry while typing it, to the point where she actually breaks her keyboard and goes to get a new one, because apparently that she does that a lot. But in case, as she finishes up her blog post for the Mystery Inc. website, she's suddenly contacted with an anonymous tip, which tells her to go out to Dead Man's Point and investigate, because there was a strange disappearance and a sardining boat has gone missing. And Velma is very happy about the fact that she now has a new mystery to investigate. So she immediately calls up all of her friends to try and help solve the mystery. And first person she calls is Daphne, who kind of hangs up on her because she's on a date with Fred, and it's not a very good time. And of course, when Daphne hangs up on her, Velma sarcastically does her best impression of Daphne, and kind of sarcastically just kind of mocks her by pointing out how much she's in love with Fred. But and then of course she calls up Scooby and asks him to put Shaggy on, because by her own admission, Scooby is near impossible to understand over the phone. And of course Scooby immediately hands Shaggy the phone, and Shaggy kind of hangs up on her as well, after pointing out that he's at the place steak and is about to get dessert. And of course she's visibly annoyed about the fact that he hung up on her. But and realizing that the rest of the gang isn't going to be much help for solving this mystery right now, she decides to go on a bit of a solo adventure and goes to go solve the mystery herself. And of course, the first thing she does is steal Daphne's family's boat. Yeah, she borrows the Blake family boat and goes out to the meeting place where she was supposed to meet her anonymous source. And of course, even remarks that she hopes Daphne won't mind. But and then wonders where her anonymous source is. At which point she starts hearing a song, and there's this somebody suddenly and she hears somebody singing a song about how she should get closer and learn everything about how she should hear her words well and listen to everything she needs to know. And it's at this point where Velma actually sees a mermaid in the water, which she remarks is impossible. But then the mermaid then proceeds to remark that she was actually the one who contacted Velma, and proceeds to point out what's actually going on, and proceeds to tell her about the mystery and the danger surrounding Crystal Cove, about how if she doesn't help to solve the mystery, that this group of evil fish people will actually destroy the town, and then proceeds to remark that it could be very dangerous if she doesn't deal with it, and proceeds to leave because she senses that the monsters are coming for her, and that if she's not careful, that they'll come for Velma as well. And then proceeds to take her leave, but then Velma asks her for her name, pointing out that she doesn't even know who she is. And the mermaid then just proceeds to call herself Amy and proceeds to leave. And of course, Velma is still trying to figure out everything that Amy just told her, but then she's actually doesn't have much time to think about it, because she's actually attacked by the fish freaks, and one of them proceeds to climb on her boat and tries to attack her. At which point, Velma kind of gets into a brief fight with the fish freaks by accelerating and decelerating the boat to throw them off every time they climb on, and she winds up escaping, but the boat that winds up taking some superficial damage. At which point later that day, she then proceeds to inform Mystery Incorporated about what she actually heard and what she's actually been told, and of course the rest of the group has no idea what's going. And of course the rest of the group has no idea what's going on. Have no idea what's going on, but they do remark that it's a bit strange about the fact that that somebody else other than Mr. E has contacted them anonymously to give them more information about a mystery, and Fred pointing out that there is indeed something regarding that story and regarding the fish freaks, that of course there's got to be something. There's got to be more to it, and it very likely will be a very dangerous mystery for them. At which point Fred asks Velma if she knows who the anonymous tipper is, but she remarks that she lies and tells him that she doesn't know. So at which point I forget if it's either I want to say it's Shaggy because he would know, but I think it's at this point where Shaggy remarks that they should go to Skipper Shelton's clan cabin, and since obviously Skipper Shelton is a fisherman himself and would likely know some of the sea stories regarding what's going on with a Dead Man's Point, and of course Daphne agrees with that, and they all decide to go over to the clan cabin where of course Scooby and Shaggy take the opportunity to order more food, as does everybody else, and proceed to tell him the story about how a sardiner had actually gone missing, and what we actually find out is something very humorous here, is that this is kind of implied in their design, but as it turns out, the sardiner is actually Skipper Shelton's brother, who is also named Skipper Shelton. And what we find out from him is that apparently he is the youngest of 6 kids, and all of them hunt various sea creatures. And presumably all of them have various deformities that are a direct result of them hunting their fish of trade. Obviously, Skipper Shelton had his nose bitten off by a clam, and also Skipper Shelton, his brother, he has a harpoon for hands that he presumably got when a sardine bit his hand off. So, and we never see the other brothers, but it's assumed that they all have similar deformities. So it's assumed they all have similar injuries regarding their fish. And also apparently Skipper Shelton's oldest brother, Skipper Shelton, apparently he is a sea dragoner according to Skipper Shelton we know, and apparently according to him, he's apparently the black sheep of the family, because obviously sea dragons to an extent don't exist. Obviously there's a species of a species of seahorse called the sea dragon, which I think is what that skipper is looking for. I think he's looking for an actual dragon, and he's never gonna find it. And of course he's the black sheep for that reason, because as we find out, the Skipper Shelton, it's very confusing, but Skipper Shelton we know then proceeds to point out that they don't actually talk about him all that much. And also that proceeds to laugh off Mystery Incorporated's claims, pointing out that according to himself, the stories of the fish freaks and Dead Man's Point are all old wives' tales, and of course proceeds to point out that's old fisherman tale that isn't actually true, and then proceeds to remark that obviously he doesn't feel like Skipper Shelton. He doesn't feel like he also makes a bit of a joke about how maybe mermaids are real as well, if that is indeed the case, and of course everybody laughs it off except Velma, who knows kind of sort of that Amy has indeed contacted her as a mermaid, but in any case with that, Mystery Incorporated, after thanking Skipper Shelton for the information, then proceed to get into the mystery machine and leave. At which point Skipper Shelton then proceeds to prepare his menu for the next day, and starts opening up some clams to make some more dishes. And also kind of remarks to himself about how he finds the whole story preposterous that Mystery Incorporated just told him. But in any case, it's at this point where he's actually attacked by the fish freaks, who all swarm his cabin, and proceed to attack him, and he just kind of lets out a scream before it fades off screen. In any case, it's at this point where where they actually where Velma actually returns home and remarks that she actually has no idea where to go forward. Other than that, they need to figure out what's actually going on with the fish freaks, and that obviously Mr. Ink is going to have to actually solve that mystery if they want to get to the bottom of it. But it's at this point where Amy actually winds up showing up at her house without any real explanation, and of course Velma is visibly confused with that Amy is there because obviously Amy's a siren, and of course the sirens aren't able to walk on land very efficiently, and Amy even alludes to that, pointing out that of course she had to climb through each of the back roads to actually get to Velma's house, and pointed out that of course that she was actually attacked by cats a couple of times, but that she's mostly fine. At which point Velma then proceeds to remark about the fact how she needs to now finish her blog information, and does proceed to leave out an information about how a special friend has actually stopped over. At which point she closes the website and to listen to Amy, and Amy then proceeds to tell her about the fact that Skipper Shelton has been abducted, with Velma being very openly surprised, pointing out that they literally just talked to him. Of course, Amy points out that she needs to get Skipper Shelton back, and points out that Mystery Incorporated may be the only person to actually help her. But it's at this point where Amy is actually interrupted by the fact that Mrs. Dinkley has actually started knocking on the door. And we find out apparently she reads Velma's blog, and apparently wants to meet this new special friend, but of course Velma is both objects. Both one because Mrs. Dinkley apparently never gives Velma any privacy, but also for the more obvious fact that there's a mermaid in her room, and of course Velma isn't really keen about the fact about showing off her new mermaid friend to her mom. So of course she scoops up Amy and puts her in the bathtub and tells her to stay quiet until she can sort everything out with her mom. And it's at this point where Mrs. Dinkley actually winds up barging in and proceeds to remark that it's lucky she has a skeleton key that she can use to open Velma's door and snoop when she's not around. And yeah, it's kind of that. I'm not unpacking that. That's a big invasion of piracy. Don't go in your kid's room. I'm not unpacking that. You guys can probably figure out the rest. But in case she then proceeds to ask where the new friend is, and of course Velma openly insists that there's nobody there, and also yells at her mom for coming into her room without permission, which apparently she does a lot. But it's at this point where they actually hear a noise coming from the bathroom, and at which point Mrs. Dinkley insists to go in the bathroom and go investigate, and sure enough, we find out that Amy had actually given both of them the slip and had actually climbed out the bathroom window, with Velma merely pointing out that there actually was indeed no one there. But Mrs. Dinkley is just very skeptical about the fact that Velma was hiding something from her, and then proceeds to leave. Meanwhile, the next day they all meet at K. Ghoul to actually figure out what exactly is going on with the mystery. And of course they start corroborating evidence to try and figure out what's going on at Dead Man's Point. And of course what we actually find, what we actually find out from Angel Dynamite is, according to herself, apparently there was an old oil platform out there on Dead Man's Point, and that's apparently they're not Destroido tried to use it to mine for oil back in the day, but it quickly became infested with fish freaks, and they stopped using it. So yeah, of course. So yeah, and when Velma actually winds up questioning her about this, pointing out that she does obviously she shouldn't know this information, because by Angel's own admission, it happened 20 years ago, long before she came to Crystal Cove. But she merely points out that she had just been keeping up with it and researching all of that because she finds that kind of stuff interesting, and proceeds to point out that she had actually read about it in a newspaper, and that's she just collects anything that gives her the heebie-jeebies. But it's at this point where Shaggy, who has been flipping through a newspaper of his own, openly remarks that Destroido is actually holding a press conference, and that that might be a good opportunity as any to go and talk to Ed Machine and get some and go on a bit of a snooping trip, and with his blessing, they mention, and of course Angel tells him to go, and goes to tell them to go to the press conference, and what we find out is that it's actually a press conference for new product that they've made, and not one that you would probably put in your body. So what we find out, of course the Ed Machine that formally opens a press conference and then reveals that he's actually made a new product called Gummy Dummies. And what we find out about Gummy Dummies is that apparently they are designed, as Ed Machine puts it, they are made with extra lead and are designed to suppress brain function so that you can continue to eat them in ignorant bliss. And remark that they come in several fun flavors, including pork, which Scooby and Shaggy openly perk up at, and Daphne just remarks how disgusting the product is, and Velma just kind of agrees with her. So yeah, what we find out is that apparently Destroido just has a long-standing history of making products that nobody in their right mind would actually eat, and yet they do. So they've become a successful company for whatever reason. But yeah, in any case, once the press conference is over and Ed Machine tells them to go help themselves to some free samples, and it's at this point, and of course Scooby and Shaggy immediately jump at the opportunity to try out a new treat. It's at this point where Velma, Fred, and Daphne walk up to Ed Machine and ask him if they can have permission to go investigate his old oil rig, and pointing out that they need to do that for investigative purposes, but he also, not only does he kind of forbid them from going there, but he also points out that he'll have them arrested for trespassing if they do. Apparently Ed Machine doesn't like people poking around his stuff, and of course, despite working for Mr. E, he does ultimately not want them solving mysteries if it means investigating his own business. So yeah, he ultimately doesn't want them going, and he then proceeds to leave and go back to work. But in any case, it's at this point where the group is actually approached by Ernesto and his group of activists. If you remember him, we met him back in the Darrow University episode back with Chargar Gothagon. But he shows up and treats Daphne like as an old friend, and even calls her comrade Daphne as a sign of respect. And of course, Daphne points out, and of course, Daphne is more than happy to introduce the rest of the group to her old friend Ernesto. And but then also wonders what he's doing there. And of course, because Ernesto's entire thing is protesting things, he then proceeds to remark that they're actually there to protest some of Destroido Corporation and all the awful, horrible things that it's done, which tracks because, as we've established, Destroido is a very dangerous company and in a real-world setting would not be allowed to exist in any sort of capacity. So yeah, of course, in the real world, they're all openly protesting not only Destroido's destruction of the environment, but also the dangerous products that they put in people's bodies and put in people's mouths. So yeah, but in any case with that, Ernesto then proceeds to leave and go back to his protesting. At which point Velma decides to lead the rest of the gang toward the oil rig, pointing out that even though they didn't get Ed Machine's permission to go investigate, she's not going to stop with that, and points out that they're just going to investigate themselves, and that he can't really stop them, especially since it's an oil rig that they apparently openly abandoned. But in any case, the gang then proceeds to get on Daphne's yacht, with Daphne then proceeding to point out that all the damage that the boat has sustained, and wonders what happened to it. And of course, Velma keeps silent because obviously it was her fault. But of course, they then proceed to go out and go investigate, and eventually do arrive at the oil rig, where they then proceed to start poking around and investigating to try and figure out what happened to Skipper Shelton and his brother, and also see if they can look for clues. And of course, they go in there, and Scooby and Shaggy openly remark about how creepy it is and about how eerie and disturbing it is. And sure enough, their feelings aren't really helped by the fact that a diving suit then proceeds to just kind of swivel out on a piston arm for whatever reason, and just kind of jump scare them. So, and of course, they collapse and land on some helium tanks, at which point Velma points out that it's just an empty suit. And of course, they deny the fact that they were scared and pick themselves back up. At which point, once they fully investigated the oil rig, they then proceed to remark that they should probably get out of there but of course, Velma is insistent that they stay because obviously they need to figure out the mystery. But and about why the fish freaks are actually guarding it, but it's exactly for that reason that Shaggy wants to leave. He points out that if they stay there any longer, the fish freaks will eventually figure out they're there and attack them. And of course, right on cue, the fish freaks then proceed to swarm the oil platform and then proceed to surround the group and proceed to tie them up and hang them over the edge of the oil platform alongside Skipper Schulten and his brother, and a new man we haven't met called Spike Charnikov, who as we find out, is a scientist who used to work at Destroido and used to run the oil rig back in the day, and was the one who actually designed it, as we find out. But what we find out is that they apparently abducted Spike to actually, as we find out, the gang actually take the opportunity to grill them about what's going on, and of course Spike admits that he's actually been working on helping them, teaching them how to run the oil rig and how to mine for oil, but. Yeah, and he also points out that the reason Dead Man's Point is an oil rig that they never are allowed to use is because apparently the earth that underneath where Dead Man's Point is actually situated, and this is just adding to the list of things that Destroido has done that are borderline, they're very illegal. Apparently, the oil rig is built upon a spot of seafloor that apparently is too fragile to actually sustain oil drilling. So when they go to drill for oil, it could potentially cause everything to just bubble up and flood everywhere and kill a lot of sea life. So yeah, for that reason, Destroyer Corp doesn't use it anymore, because apparently that was a bridge too far for them. But of course, Skipper Shelton and his brother then chime in, pointing out that they've been forced to help repair the oil rig so that it can actually do its job. And so this point where the fish freaks actually wind up arriving on the oil platform, and Spike and Dr. Charnikov openly tells them not to drill for oil because it can kill a lot of fish, which he also points out is kind of hypocritical considering that they are supposedly fish. But it's at this point where he actually starts drilling, where the fish freaks, despite this, actually climb on and then proceed to turn on the oil rig, before jumping back in the ocean. And Dr. Charnikov openly admits that if they don't do something soon, they'll actually be in a very dangerous position, because obviously the oil rig will actually flood everything. But and of course they can't do anything while they're tied up and suspended over the rig. At which point Amy actually admits that she can help and proceeds to climb up the oil rig with nothing but her arm strength, because obviously she doesn't have legs. And of course, everybody is very confused about the fact that there's a mermaid, but except, of course, for Velma, who admits that she's her special friend and that nobody should steal her, which she admits is a little pathetic out loud. But it's at this point where Amy actually cuts them all free and proceeds to pull them overboard onto the oil rig. At which point they try to figure out what way to actually shut off the oil rig before it floods the ocean with oil. And Dr. Charnikov admits, and he even admits that this is really bad design when Scooby brings it up, but he points out that the only way to turn the oil rig off is to press the off switch, and the off switch is on the drill. And again, he admits it's bad drill design. At which point Velma volunteers Scooby and Shaggy to go turn off the rig, pointing out that by their own admission, they are able to hold their breath for extended periods of time. And when Scooby and Shaggy openly admit that they're unable to actually, that they only use that ability to inhale large amounts of food, at Velma and Daphne's condescending prodding, most accurately, they ultimately concede to do it. But also remark that they don't really want to go down there anyway because there's fish freaks down there. But of course, Fred then chimes in, pointing out that obviously that's actually perfect for them because that means they can lure them into a trap. And it's at this point where Scooby and Shaggy realize they're being bait again, and realizing they really have no choice, they then proceed to suit up in wetsuits and then proceed to dive into the ocean to go turn off the oil rig. And they do eventually find the switch and turn it off, which of course alerts the fish freaks to their location. So of course they then proceed to climb up. And proceed to climb up after Scooby and Shaggy into the oil rig, who immediately lure the fish freaks into a trap. And of course Amy kind of goads them into climbing into the trap again for themselves by singing a song about how they should step closer. And of course once she sings a song about how they've wandered into her net. And It's at this point where everybody celebrates about the fact that they've actually caught the fish freaks, with Fred remarking that it's not his most complex trap, but he likes the simplicity behind it. And of course, it's of course at this point where Spike actually decides to unmask the fish freaks and figure out who's actually been holding them captive this whole time. And of course, it turns out to be Ernesto. Interestingly enough, and of course, and even though by Daphne's own admission, that's a very strange thing for them to do, because as he points out, Ernesto is a very big protector of the environment. So of course, it doesn't really make sense for him to do that. But it's at this point where Ernesto actually proceeds to reveal what exactly he and his protesters were actually trying to accomplish. And as it turns out, it was just money. So yeah, as we find out, Ernesto was looking into their new mark, Destroido. When they came across information on the oil rig, which apparently was stuffed in the back dumpster behind Destroido Corporation, and finding out that the oil rig has been abandoned, and realizing they can sell the oil for money to fund their protest, because protesting is expensive, according to Ernesto. They then remarked that they were going to dress up as fish freaks to scare anybody away from the oil rig, then drill for oil so that they can sell it and fund more things. But when Daphne points out that that's actually very counterproductive, when Daphne and especially Velma point out that that's very counterproductive, with Velma even pointing out that they're destroying the environment so that they could have money to save the environment, Ernesto then proceeds to point out that they need to be that a good activist needs to be willing to destroy the environment if they're willing to save it, and in which the Mystery Incorporated remarks, no, isn't a thing. And of course, the group of the fish freaks are then swiftly arrested and hauled off. And Velma is very happy about the fact that they've actually captured the fish freaks, but then she turns around and discovers Amy the Siren is actually making out with Dr. Charnikov, and she's very visibly confused, and even looks down to discover that Amy no longer has her fin, and it actually has human legs. And of course, what we find out, and of course this is obvious, but of course Amy was actually wearing a costume this whole time, but as we find out, Amy was actually her real name, and what we find out is she's actually married to Dr. Chernikov and is his wife. And what we find out is that she's actually she actually is a professional jingle writer and singer, and which Fred even remarks that he felt her voice was familiar, and wonders if that was why he felt an urge to put on deodorant when she was singing. So it is, and of course, Velma is openly hurt about the fact that her friend lied to her, and is openly distressed about the fact that Amy lied to her about actually being a mermaid, and also openly lied to her about it possibly being her friend. But it's at this point where Amy reveals that not only is she Velma's friend, very much so at that. She also points out that the reason she dressed up as a mermaid to deceive Velma into solving the mystery, making it seem believable, is because apparently she went to the police, and not only did they laugh at her, but they decided to add Dead Man's Point to their list of tourist attractions and asked her for directions, which of course she didn't give them. But does ultimately thank Velma for saving her husband, and remarks that if she likes that they can keep in touch, and of course Velma is very happy about the fact that Amy is very much still her friend, and the two ultimately do decide to stay in touch. But it's at this point where Amy then proceeds to remark that she's actually very happy that Mr. Inc. was able to solve the mystery for her, and remarks that she's a huge fan of Mystery Incorporated, but and it's at this point where Velma remarks that they can't actually take all the credit, because, as she points out, Angel Dynamite actually gave them a lead about the fact that Destroido had an oil rig back in the day, and that she looked up all the information to kind of hide everything, and actually look up all the information to give them. But as we find out, that shouldn't be possible, because as we find out from Amy, apparently Destroido covered up the whole mystery regarding the oil rig. So apparently they covered up the accident with the oil rig, and that nobody would actually be able to know about it, and the papers never even got a hold of it. Which eventually strikes on Velma as suspicious, and sure enough, while Angel Dynamite is actually on a commercial break for her radio show, Velma decides to confront her in her station, and And of course, she winds up giving Angel a bit of a fright at first, with Angel pointing out that she should really speak up before then, because sneaking up on somebody is a really bad idea. But it's at this point where Velma admits that one of her things is that one of her biggest flaws is that she likes to see the good in people, despite her inquisitive nature. And of course, she's always been proven wrong, according to herself. And at which point she then proceeds to ask Angel how she really knew about the oil rig, and Angel then just parrots her answer from earlier about how she looked it up in a newspaper, but Velma doesn't believe her at all, and then proceeds to point out that the list of evidence against Angel has been piling up. And so obviously there's been a couple of mysteries that Angel has had information on that of course nobody should actually have information on, and the whole oil rig mystery was just one more domino on that. It was just one more piece of evidence against her, and of course believing that Angel Dynamite isn't even Angel's real name. She then proceeds to point out that she does feel like there's actually a lot of information that regarding the Mystery Inc. mystery, the Mystery Incorporated mysteries that only a member of Mystery Incorporated would know, and then proceeds to implicate that Angel Dynamite's real name is Cassidy Williams and is a member of the old Mystery Incorporated, and dares to ask if she's wrong. So yeah, that's the big reveal for that episode, that Angel Dynamite is actually Cassidy Williams from the old Mystery Incorporated. So yeah, this episode does kind of bring up a couple of an interesting implication, being that the main one being that of course, if Angel Dynamite is a member of the old Mystery Incorporated, then that begs the question of where the rest of them are. So, of course, we know that Professor Pericles is actually Mr. Incorporated as well, and there was an interesting reaction where Professor Pericles and Angel Dynamite had an extended interaction, and of course they recognized each other. So yeah, this seems like that was going to be a plot that they were eventually going to build to, because obviously Angel has had some interesting reactions whenever they talked about the original Mystery Incorporated, and even seemed to recognize Professor Pericles and had information that they shouldn't have. So yeah, the thread was definitely there, and it was very much time they pulled on it, but yeah, it is very interesting in that if Professor Pericles and Angel and Cassidy Williams are both in Mystery Incorporated, that also begs the question of where the rest of them are. I've already suspected that Mr. E might in fact be Ricky, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But there is definitely evidence for it. But that also begs the question of where Brad and Judy are. Where are they? Have they been hiding in Mystery Incorporated in Crystal Cove this whole time as well? We don't know. We don't even know what's going on with the rest of Mystery Incorporated. Of course, the original Mystery Incorporated. Of course, that also begs the question of if they actually didn't disappear in the caves and what actually happened. And the original episode where they actually went to investigate that did kind of allude to that, but I don't know. It's very strange. It is definitely a very strange little twist in that mystery that I do kind of like, and I'm very curious about where that plot thread is actually going to go. How is Cassidy going to actually indulge the rest of Mystery Incorporated to point out what's actually going on, and what actually happened in the original Mystery Incorporated, or does she not know? I don't know, but that's a thing that's eventually going to be dropped. So yeah, that's gonna do it for my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. What you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out, and you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks that are my way of saying thanks. So be sure to check those out. Link is down in the description. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent one. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new or see more of what you like, then be sure to check either of the videos out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!